Back in the day, men worked 12-hour shifts and still came home to a warm, home-cooked meal every night. With simple recipes, Mom turned basic ingredients into the kind of food that was ready before 7 p.m., fed the family, and kept a working man going. These are the meals that built America. So why did they disappear? Baked apples. Some days, all Dad wanted after a long shift was a delicious dessert that tasted like something from when he was young, but didn't require Mom to fire up the whole kitchen. Mother would core an apple, stuff it with brown sugar and a pat of margarine, then microwave it until it bubbled and steamed. This dessert was blue-collar comfort food at its finest, because apples, margarine, and brown sugar were always affordable, and home cooks used them to stretch the groceries further than fancy desserts ever could. If the kids had been good, she'd add raisins or a pinch of cinnamon. Served with a spoon and the sweet syrup that pooled at the bottom, it satisfied a working man's hunger for something sweet before calling it a night. Creamed corn with egg drop. For a working man coming home late, this was supper that did the job. Mom would heat a can of creamed corn in a worn skillet, crack in a couple of eggs, and stir just enough to blend it all. No prep work, no fancy techniques, just a few minutes on the stove, and a plain food that filled you up was ready. The eggs brought the protein, the corn brought the strength, and if there was pepper, parsley, or a splash of milk to stretch it, that was a bonus. Some nights she'd add cheese or crumble crackers on top. It warmed you through and made sure the man who worked all day got his meal on the table in 10 minutes flat. Lettuce with mayonnaise and paprika was the quickest way to turn a leafy green vegetable into a real meal, and it only needed 3 ingredients that any grocery store carried. Mom would take a head of iceberg lettuce, shred it with a dull kitchen knife, and pile it into a neat mound. Then add a generous amount of mayonnaise and just enough sprinkling of paprika to add color, and make it look like she'd planned it that way. In the 1950s and 1960s, this appeared on everything, from cafeteria trays to church luncheons, and men would load it in their lunch pails, alongside meatloaf or a sandwich. It filled the plate, filled the stomach, and satisfied a man coming home hungry. Asparagus with cheese. When Dad got promoted to floor supervisor and the family wanted to celebrate without breaking the bank, canned asparagus with cheese sauce brought a touch of fancy hotel meals to the dinner table. Mama would drain a can of asparagus, warm it through, then pour over cheese sauce made from evaporated milk, margarine, and cheddar, or whatever we had. The soft spears and creamy sauce made asparagus the one green vegetable that even the pickiest kids would eat. Smart working wives served this alongside ham or meatloaf when the boss was coming over, knowing it looked respectable but didn't demand hours in the kitchen. Graham cracker pudding cups. I remember when a fancy restaurant opened on our block, and they organized this contest as a way of creating awareness. Contestants were asked to make any meal that wouldn't take time, and Mom stole the show with her graham cracker pudding cups. She'd been making it for years, got them ready before Dad's coffee was even poured. Her recipe was a box of instant pudding, a sleeve of graham crackers, and a few jelly jars or teacups. She'd make chocolate, vanilla, or butterscotch pudding, then layer it with crackers to look like a little cake in a cup. By the time Dad sat down, the crackers had softened into sweet, cake-like layers. Sometimes there was whipped topping or banana slices, and it was the kind of weeknight treat that felt like a small celebration. Minute steak. When the foreman was coming over for dinner and all we had in the freezer was a pack of thin steaks, minute steak with mustard butter glaze was the meal that saved the day and made us look like we planned ahead. Those paper-thin cuts were cheap, quick, and ready to sizzle the moment they hit the hot iron. Mom would drop them in the skillet, watch them curl and brown, then flip fast before they turned tough as boot leather. The real magic happened with that mustard butter glaze that melted like restaurant sauce, coating the meat with flavor that made those thin cuts taste like thick money. Mom knew payday dictated the menu, so she served it with mashed potatoes, rice, or even a thick slice of toast to stretch every budget. Cottage fried apples was another working man's dinner from Depression era that never went out of style, especially in blue-collar families where payday dictated the menu. In a working man's home, the aroma greeted him on crisp mornings or chilly evenings as Mom dropped those sliced apples, even the bruised ones too, into a hot pan with butter or margarine. A handful of brown sugar coated each slice with a caramel-like glaze, transforming them into a glossy, soft texture in minutes. Before you know it, they were ready to spoon over toast, waffles, or oatmeal for breakfast, or alongside pork chops for Sunday dinner. For a man who'd been on his feet all day, those apples were more than just food. They were a welcome home scent. And blue-collar elegance that understood a working family's reality when Dad's paycheck was stretched thin and payday was days away was cracker omelets. Mom would beat a couple of eggs, crush in a handful of dry saltines if she was in a hurry, or soak them with milk if we had any, and she had the time. Then pour the whole mix into a hot skillet and hope it held together long enough to flip. The crackers softened but kept a little bite to feel like more than it was. She either flips or folds it, but either way, it was a breakfast that stuck to your ribs and kept a working man fed until the next meal came around. Some nights, there was onion, cheese, and other nights it was just eggs, crumbs, or leftover vegetables. These omelets were survival food, tasted like resourcefulness, somewhere between a frittata and determination. Cheese dreams were blue-collar comfort food disguised as simplicity when Dad came home from a double shift, and all that was left in the icebox was a loaf of white bread and some sliced cheese. He'd lay that bread, top it with cheese or cheddar, and crown it with a single tomato slice in the center. It went under the broiler until the cheese bubbled golden and the edges of the bread became crisp. The cheese melted and oozed. The tomato added just enough tang to cut through the richness, and that soft bread turned into a sandwich with substance. Some families added oregano, others used pimento. Folks enjoyed cheese dreams because it delivered the kind of honest food that understood the importance of full bellies and the satisfaction of making something good from whatever you had, which mattered more to families. On the days Dad came home after his shift and the card game was in an hour, instant coffee ice cream was the dessert that made hosting guests look easy, as if he had planned weeks ahead. Mother would mix whipped topping with a spoonful of instant coffee in the same jar that got him through morning shifts, add sugar, and spoon it into clean cups. 1 hour in the freezer, and desserts that looked like he'd planned ahead were available. The neighbors were impressed every time, because Mom had a way of making coffee have a grown-up flavor, while the cream kept it smooth enough for kids. Topped with chocolate shavings, these cups delivered the kind of satisfaction that made ordinary game nights feel special. They weren't bakery desserts, but they fooled everyone who mattered. Potato chip and scrambled eggs was the kind of quick, clever cooking that belonged in a working man's kitchen. A handful of crushed chips went into beaten eggs, then straight into a buttered pan. The chips softened just enough to blend in, but kept a little crunch. In the 60s, it showed up in novelty cookbooks, but in real kitchens, it was pure resourcefulness, using the broken bits from the bottom of the bag to stretch breakfast or throw together a fast lunch. Some families added hot sauce or cheese, others kept it plain, but it was always ready in minutes. Perfect for feeding teenagers who'd eat anything, a late night or midday fix, or a quick bite before heading back out to work. Applesauce with red hots was a shortcut that could turn an ordinary meal into something worth talking about. You'd warm a jar of applesauce on the stove, Stir in a handful of those bright cinnamon candies and watch them melt into a swirl of pink and red. In minutes, you had a side dish that was sweet, lightly spiced, and just showy enough to feel special. Moms in the 50s and 60s served it with pork chops, in school lunch trays, or in little bowls after supper. The kind of quick touch that made a working man's plate look like it took more effort than it did. It was fast, festive, and fun, proof that a little color and a hint of cinnamon could make even the simplest food feel like a treat. Peanut butter and honey on raisin was the sandwich Dad always counted on at 5 a.m. before his morning shift, and needed a meal that layered fast before the bus or the work whistle, and kept the kids full until midday. Thick peanut butter that stuck to the roof of your mouth, golden honey that dripped if you weren't careful, and raisin bread that was a treat and breakfast. In the 60s and 70s, it showed up in lunchboxes wrapped in wax paper, slightly flattened, but still tasting like a small luxury. The peanut butter delivered protein that kept hunger at bay through long school days or double shifts. The raisin bread gave a dessert-like twist, while the honey tied it all together. Cold baked beans on saltines. When Dad was between paychecks and the pantry was down to canned goods and crackers, cold baked beans on saltines was the snack that helped a working man make do with what was there, and it worked out just fine. Pop open a can of beans, grab a sleeve of saltines, and spoon the sweet, tangy mess right onto the crackers. No cooking, no cleanup, just honest hunger meeting honest food. Some families dressed it up with a slice of cheese, others added a squirt of mustard. But regardless of the combo, it still delivered the kind of satisfaction that was real. In kitchens where every dollar counted and waste wasn't an option, cold beans on crackers was the best shortcut that filled you up and didn't apologize for being simple. And like PB&J, microwave cinnamon toast was the meal that taught kids how to fend for themselves, when Dad was already out the door for his morning shift, and Mom was getting ready for her job at the diner. Smear margarine straight from the tub onto soft white bread, sprinkle on cinnamon like snow, then dust it all with powdered sugar until it has that sweet, blizzard-like look. 20 seconds in the microwave, and you'll have a meal that smells like a true Saturday morning. It wasn't crisp, like the kind Mama made herself, but no one cared because of the small thrill of making something yourself. In the late 20th century, it was a quiet kitchen staple. Today, it's nearly forgotten. A soft little bite of nostalgia. Shrimp and grits, a plate of pure Southern pride that brought restaurant flavor to the working man's table when Dad finally got that promotion to shift supervisor, and the family wanted to celebrate the taste of success. Every family had its twist, but Mom's secret recipe was understanding that good grits needed time, milk, butter, and enough cheddar cheese. In coastal kitchens, this dish started as a fisherman's fuel. Over time, it traveled north with working families, landing in industrial towns where it reminded folks of home while filling bellies after long shifts. It was rich, salty, and comforting when done right. That's why old cooks guarded their recipes and techniques like treasure, because shrimp and grits wasn't just a meal, it was a legacy. We share stories like this every day on our channel or community. If that sounds like your kind of table, watch any of this video appearing on your screen now. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and we'll see you in the next one.